The phone rang at 2 a.m., slicing through the silence like a blade, and before I even reached for it, I knew that whatever waited on the other side would change the shape of my life forever. I had no missed calls, no messages, no reason for my heart to suddenly pound as if it already understood what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The screen glowed in the darkness, an unfamiliar number blinking like a warning, and the moment I answered, a trembling voice broke through the static of sleep and loneliness, asking if I could come over and be with her, as if I were the last lifeline left in a storm she could no longer survive alone. Before the story pulls you any deeper, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of showing up for someone when it matters most, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Sometimes the smallest gestures connect strangers across the world in ways we never expect. My name is Daniel Harris, and at that time in my life, I was barely holding myself together. I was 32, recently divorced, living in a small apartment that still smelled faintly of the life I had lost. Nights were the worst. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by memories of arguments that went unresolved and dreams that ended too soon. I worked long hours at a logistics company, came home to microwave dinners, and convinced myself that isolation was safer than disappointment. So when that call came, my first instinct was annoyance, followed by confusion, and then something heavier, something that settled in my chest like responsibility. The voice on the other end didn't sound drunk or playful or mistaken in the careless way wrong calls usually are. It sounded tired in a way that only comes from carrying pain for too long. She said she thought she was calling someone else, but she didn't hang up. She couldn't. There was a pause filled with shallow breathing, and I understood without her saying it that she was afraid of being alone more than she was embarrassed by dialing the wrong number. I should have ended the call. I had every reason to. But instead, I listened as she explained that her name was Emily Carter, that she had moved to the city only 3 months earlier, and that tonight had been especially unbearable. I sat on the edge of my bed, the room lit only by the street lamp outside, and felt something stir inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the grand kind that changes the world, but the quiet kind that asks you to be decent when no one is watching. Emily told me she had lost her mother the year before, that her father had disappeared when she was a child, and that she had recently ended a relationship that had drained whatever confidence she had left. She had meant to call a coworker, someone she trusted, but fate or exhaustion had scrambled the numbers. Now she was sitting alone in her apartment, overwhelmed by thoughts she couldn't outrun. I asked for her address, not thinking through the consequences, only knowing that leaving her alone felt wrong. The city streets were nearly empty as I drove, traffic lights blinking lazily at intersections, my reflection staring back at me from the windshield looking older than I felt. Doubt crept in with every mile. What if this was a mistake? What if I was walking into something dangerous or foolish? But another thought pushed harder. What if this was the night someone needed me, and I chose comfort over compassion? Emily lived in an aging building on the east side of town, the kind with flickering hallway lights and chipped paint on the doors. When she opened the door, her eyes were red from crying, her shoulders hunched as if she had been trying to make herself smaller to survive the weight of the night. She looked surprised that I had actually come, as if kindness had become so rare in her world that she no longer trusted it to be real. I stepped inside, and the air felt heavy, filled with unspoken grief and half-packed boxes that suggested she had never truly settled in. We sat in silence for a long time. There was no dramatic rescue, no sudden transformation. Just two strangers sharing the same space, breathing the same air, letting the storm pass minute by minute. Emily told me about her dreams of becoming a children's book illustrator, about how her mother used to save every drawing she made, about how the world felt colder without someone who believed in you unconditionally. I shared pieces of my own brokenness, how my marriage had ended not with betrayal but with neglect, how two people can slowly stop seeing each other even while living under the same roof. As the night stretched toward morning, something subtle changed. The fear in Emily's posture softened. The tightness in my chest loosened. We weren't fixing each other, but we were reminding each other that we still existed, that we were still capable of being seen. When dawn finally bled into the sky, pale and forgiving, I left her apartment with a quiet promise to check in on her, unsure of what that promise would become. Days turned into weeks, and our lives began to intertwine in gentle, unexpected ways. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into shared meals. Emily started smiling more, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes before the lips. I found myself looking forward to evenings again, not because everything was perfect, but because something was growing. Trust. Hope. A sense of belonging neither of us had planned for. But healing is never a straight line. Emily had nights when the grief came roaring back, when memories of her mother left her gasping. I had days when the bitterness of my divorce resurfaced, whispering that happiness was temporary and loss inevitable. There were misunderstandings, moments when old fears threatened to pull us apart. Emily worried she was leaning on me too much. I worried I was replacing one dependence with another. We learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, to talk through those fears instead of running from them. One evening, months after that first call, Emily showed me a stack of illustrated pages spread across her living room floor. It was the beginning of her first children's book, a story about a lost star that finds its way home by following small lights along the way. I recognized myself in those pages, not as the hero, but as one of those small lights. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of the way I had shown up in the world. Life didn't magically become easy. There were setbacks, financial worries, and moments when the past knocked loudly on our present. But we faced them together, not as two broken people clinging to each other, but as two healing people choosing each other. The wrong call at 2 a.m. had become the right moment at the right time, a reminder that sometimes the universe whispers instead of shouts, and you have to be awake enough to listen. If this story is reaching something tender inside you, if it reminds you of a moment when someone showed up for you or when you wished you had shown up for someone else, take a second to like this video, share it, and let us know it mattered. Your engagement helps stories like this find the people who need them most. Just before this story ends, I want to ask you something simple but meaningful. Comment below with one act of kindness that changed your life, whether big or small, because your words might become the light someone else is searching for in the dark. Years later, I still think about how close I came to ignoring that call, to rolling over and letting the phone ring itself silent. Emily and I eventually married, not because fate demanded it, but because we chose each other every day, starting with that night. And whenever my phone rings late, I remember that sometimes a wrong number isn't wrong at all. Sometimes it's an invitation to become the person you were always meant to be, simply by answering and being there.